Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Tidal Flooding Talk, brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition. I'm Joe Martucci. She's Palmas Giles. Dan Skeldon is probably going to come in at some point during this episode. He's having some technical issues, but as they say, Palma, only the strong survive, right?
That is true. Although
Yeah.
technical issues are extremely frustrating, I will say that.
Yes, they are. And I know as I'm editing these Tidal Flooding Talks, we don't have a lot of errors, so that's great. But, when you get into sound cutting out or videos dropping out, that just sucks. And that's just the way life is sometimes. So anyway, what's going on, Palma? What's new? What's exciting? What's, I don't know, what's going on down in Margate?
Well, what's exciting for me, and speaking of technology, is I just got one of those Wi-Fi bird feeder camera things, and it's been a very exciting last couple days seeing all the different birds that come visit for some
This
food.
is what happens when we get old, right? Like we pivot from the 20s into the 30s, and then we start looking at birds all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it just happens.
It just happened. That's funny because that could have been the one thing you couldn't stop talking about either. So now I'm looking forward
Well,
to the end to see what you have in mind.
I really can't stop talking about it. I couldn't even wait. So, how about you, Joe? What's going on?
That's true. Well, I'm going to save what I really want to say until the end, but I will say I am back. I wasn't here the past 2 episodes because you would not want to see what I looked like. My eye and right side of my head was very swollen. Thankfully, Monmouth Medical Center and my doctor, Dr. Hankey, took care of it. I still have a couple of lingering issues, but it's minor. As you can see, my eye looks great. So we're all healed. So that's the big thing. And yeah, it's summer, those kind of good stuff. So anyway, you talked about birds, Palma. Great segue, great segue into today's guest. We are going to speak with somebody about balancing beach restoration with shorebird habitats in Hempstead, New York. Now, that is in Long Island, New York, for those of you who are unfamiliar. And here to talk with us all about it today, we have Tara Schneider Moran, who is the Senior Conversation Biologist for the town of Hempstead. She's also my cousin through marriage. So, nepotism is alive and well here at Tidal Flooding Talk. But Tara, thanks for coming on the show today. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Yeah, great. We love having you. We've talked plenty about today, so I know you have a lot of good information for us about what you're doing. Even though we're Tidal Flooding Talk, we generally like to talk about things like coastal resiliency, and this falls directly within it. So before we get into the balancing beach restoration, can you tell us about your interest in, let's say, coastal resiliency?
Sure. Working here in local government on the South Shore, it's critical. It becomes a main part of what we do every day. We're in an extremely populated location. The town of Hempstead has close to 800,000 residents, most populous township in the country. So it's, we were, as you were in New Jersey, experienced Hurricane Sandy. It's still fresh in a lot of people's minds as we still see houses being razed. So as a biologist and focusing on habitat management, we always want to make sure that we have also coastal resiliency and the human element tied into that focus as well. So how do we balance those two things? How do we ensure that we are either restoring or creating habitat for wildlife while also creating scenarios that are protecting our coastlines?
Now, for those who aren't familiar with shorebird management, what exactly do you do during the winter to prepare beaches for nesting season?
Sure. So our department has a legacy here of kind of thinking outside the box, and this predates my time here at the town of Hempstead. Since the 90s, they really started looking at the other biologists that were here who were, kind of started our department in the 70s and were midway through their careers at that point. We're really trying to think about how do we create this habitat for shorebirds while also balancing how our beaches are used in such a heavily populated area. So how do we balance recreation? How do we balance all the homes that we have on our barrier beaches and the people that live here? but also create habitat that can support species, especially threatened and endangered species that have regulatory protections, and trying to support those populations. So in the winter, we do a lot of work to manipulate the habitat and create a habitat that shorebirds like. If we didn't have hardened shorelines and we didn't have homes along our barrier beaches, there would be a lot more overwashes. We'd have much more dynamic situation on our coastal beaches, inlets especially. But because much of our shoreline is hardened, we had to come up with ways to create that dynamic environment that the shorebirds were drawn to. So a lot of that involves devegetation of areas, making sure that we have, we protect our dunes and that our dunes are established, but that we also have areas that we ensure are devegetated where the shorebirds like to come back year after year. And something that we really focus in on is creating ephemeral pools and making sure that we have these areas that can be protected inside string fencing, allow some water to get in from the shore, and create these ephemeral pools that create foraging habitats that the shorebirds are really drawn to. And by creating these microhabitats along the barrier islands, it draws in these shorebirds to areas that we can pretty well we can predict that they're going to come back there year after year. And the birds get used to coming back to these areas that they return to year after year. And when the people show up after Memorial Day, or in many cases late in June, like this year, we had pretty cold May and into June. We really didn't have people coming to the beach until this past weekend. When they arrive and the shorebirds have already been here for several months, there's no surprises. They're kind of able to set up their beach chair in areas that they like, and the shorebirds have already set up in areas that they're used to.
So, Tara, you kind of touched on this, but just in more detail, like, how do the shorebirds help with keeping the coastal ecosystem, let's say, protected or fortified against sea level rise, or storms, or just how does it help humans? How about that way?
Well, I wouldn't say that shorebirds directly help with that, but it's creating it's how do you have a dune system, how do you have hardened shorelines, and create a situation where the shorebirds can thrive, because often those types of modifications to our shoreline end up reducing the amount of available habitat to shorebirds. So I think it's more about balancing these modifications that we've made for a very long time to protect our coastline and continue to maintain those, but also create habitats for these shorebirds that wouldn't otherwise exist because of the modifications we've made to the coastline.
Now, what do you think, smaller shore town communities could do to help contribute to this, or even like the green teams that are out there, or even if there's anything just homeowners can do that live along the coast to help, contribute towards protecting their habitat?
Sure. Well, I'm not sure, I'm not as familiar with exactly how things are managed in New Jersey. I think it is similar to Long Island. We know a lot of the historic nesting areas, and those are usually protected early on. Homeowners can, make sure that they're aware of where those areas are and try not to disturb them, and focus their recreation activities in areas away from those protected areas. And, I think what we're seeing more and more, you mentioned your bird camera that you have. I mean, we're starting to see more and more of an appreciation for the wildlife that we have here. And, we've done a lot of outreach as well, trying to teach people the different species that we have here. So one example, I'll use I'm sure the piping plover probably gets a lot of mixed reactions from the public. But one of the interesting things that we've seen happen with the really strict regulations for that species is it's brought back an entire ecosystem that wasn't previously there. So we now have, plant species that weren't previously present. We have a variety of shorebird species that were not previously there. So by having this one umbrella regulatory species, it's created an entire ecosystem. And I think having that has created more of an appreciation from the public and an interest in coming to visit those sites and see the shorebirds. But yeah, to answer your original question, it's, respect those protected areas and, try and gain some interest and spread the word to your neighbors about these interesting habitats that are here.
Right. We're going to take our first break, and then we'll be back with much more from Tara here on Tidal Flooding Talk. And we are back. I'm Joe Martucci. We're with Palmas Giles and Tara Schneider Moran. We're talking about storm protection, shorebird habitats. And Tara, tell us a little bit more, about how you're doing this preparation and this, we'll say, off-season, winter time or cold season time, or time kind of preparation here. And for our listeners who are on our podcast platforms and are not watching on YouTube or on Facebook, she has a PowerPoint slide. She has a slide deck that she's going to go through too. So if you want to see what she's saying, hop on over to YouTube. Make sure to subscribe while you do that and check it out. So we're going to let Tara take the reins here and fire away on this.
Yeah, some of this is hard to visualize, so I thought these images would be helpful for folks to see. But basically, what we're showing here is how we create some of these ephemeral pools. This is all done in the off season with appropriate permits, where we do some work in the off season to clear out some of the heavier vegetation and create these dynamic habitats that the birds like. I mean, they really love a beach right after a hurricane. So we are, devegetating some of these areas that have become overgrown because they were protected. But at the same time, you mentioned previously, how can folks get involved and help? We do a lot of work with the community in building our dunes and doing beach grass plantings. So we make sure that those areas are protected and protecting our infrastructure and our homes while creating these other habitats for the shorebirds. This is a little bit showing you a little bit of the work that we do in the field to understand, this isn't just a guess. All of the elevations are monitored with, we have GPS equipment that's able to survey the beaches and give us, sub-centimeter accuracy and be able to see areas, that we're protecting for dune areas and areas where we're creating these ephemeral pools and overwash areas for the shorebirds out on the beaches.
Can you explain what overwash areas are, Tara?
Sure. Yeah. Like I mentioned, shorebirds like dynamic habitat, and these little areas on the beaches where we can have, in maybe a big storm event or a spring tide, we might get some of the ocean water coming up onto the beaches in areas that we plan for it. So we create these elevations that will allow for that, while we keep the recreation beach higher so it doesn't have those overwash areas. And we're able to do all this using, creating these topo layers and mapping. So there's a lot of planning that goes into the work that we do to create the habitat in the winter.
Great.
Do you think that beach goers have become more accepting once they understand the purpose of what you're doing there?
I do. We are seeing that because what you're seeing here, these are actual successful nests that we've had over, several decades. And you could see they're very concentrated in the areas where we're doing this habitat management. I'm not sure if you could see my cursor on the screen.
We can.
Well, okay, so like this area here that I'm circling, this is where we do, some of that really intensive habitat management. This area here is the recreation beach. So, this is the area where we have, lifeguard chairs and really heavy, populations in the summer months, similar to the Jersey Shore, I'm sure. So when people arrive, this area, they're accustomed to this area being, the bird areas and protected, and they have plenty of space to come down and enjoy the beach in the summer months. So everyone is really desperate for this time of year. So I think that they had, this balancing these two, activities and priorities have really worked very well for the public. We get very few complaints. And more we have people really appreciating the ecosystems that have developed, and we've had pretty amazing engagement with some of our, we do some Shorebird work, walks and outreach. We partner with Audubon New York to share the shore days and, educate folks about the different species that are utilizing the beaches. Beach cleanups with partners like Atlantic Marine Conservation Society, other non-for-profits in the areas that are focusing on these environmental issues have really helped with engagement with the public.
Great. And then, in terms of what you're doing, Tara, right? So is this where you're like boots on the ground doing this? Are you coordinating this? Is this the perks of being the senior conservation biologist? You get to kind of tell people what to do. Where are we at with this?
Sure, I'm less and less in the field. Much of my career, I did a lot of this work out in the fields, GPSing all the sites and doing the topo work, coordinating with the different entities in the off season, permitting. Now I have some really amazing, talented staff, Rob and Kate. If you're out there watching, they're my amazing colleagues that are out there doing a lot of this field work and collecting the data. And a lot of it now is coordination with our various partners to get this work done. So, and keeping it low cost, that we could do everything in house, that we don't need to find funding to do this work and keep it going.
Got it. Good, Palm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking like, I think since you have back to the beachgoer thing, I think since it seems so condensed to certain areas, it's like not really impacting much of for people just going to for recreational purposes. So has it always been like that, like centralized, or has it been more spread out in the past?
Yeah, I think this work over the years has really helped consolidate it. I'm sure, after Hurricane Sandy, a lot changed on our beaches. And I'm sure in Jersey, you saw a lot of projects with the Army Corps of Engineers. In many cases, that actually opened up some new habitats in areas where we didn't previously have habitat. And so it's been, keeping up with those areas and trying to manage them and working with the Army Corps, for our maintenance on the beaches to make sure that the shoreline is protected while also having these habitats. So it's evolved for sure, but I think has been really successful. I actually had one more. I stopped sharing, but I have one more thing I can show you. This, just to give a little bit of an example of, how this is more than just one species of bird. This is really an ecosystem. I mean, this just shows some of the other bird species that we have utilizing these habitats. This is along a 3-mile beach on the South Shore of Long Island. You could see, heavily, this is a better view with this aerial showing you how much development there is, how many homes there are here, and how much infrastructure. But amongst this, we have really high density nesting across all these species. The piping plover is one, of course, American oyster catcher, black skimmer. We have the largest black skimmer colony in New York State, common terns, least terns. So these are some of our numbers from last year, just to show, that we have really high density nesting in these really small areas, that are protected. And then it may seem like a lot here, but most of the beach is still very readily available to the public, and it's just created a nice balance.
Now, do storms affect these nesting areas, like just from typical thunderstorms to a major tidal flooding event?
Yeah, it has to be a pretty major tidal flooding event. We do have, some of that will take out some shorebird nesting earlier in the season. We didn't have any this year, but from time to time that is an issue. But
Got you.
yeah.
All right. We're going to take our final break here, and we'll be back, and we'll talk about the one thing we can't stop talking about, tidal flooding or otherwise, here on Tidal Flooding Talk.
Hello and welcome back. You are watching Tidal Flooding Talk, and we are brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition. We would like to remind our viewers to protect natural floodplains. Floodplains like salt marshes and stream beds are nature's way of managing floodwaters while improving the environment. Help them do their job. Reduce boat speeds to minimize erosion, use fertilizers sparingly to protect water quality, and limit hard surfaces in your yard so rainwater can absorb naturally. A little effort goes a long way in protecting your community.
All right. And we, Tara, we're going to close out here. We want to talk a little bit about the salt marsh restoration work that you've done. I know there's a few islands that you've taken care of, High Meadow Islands, Smith Marsh, and the Middle Island. I think if I have those three correct. So that's super important. We talk about that on Tidal Flooding Talk here. So we'd love to hear your experiences in New York with them.
Yeah, tidal marshes, as I'm sure you talk about often, is also critical to resiliency and protecting our shorelines, but also critical habitat for, shorebirds amongst many other, species that are utilizing that habitat. And some of the work that we've done, we've done a lot of movement ecology studies tracking the species that are nesting on our beaches, and, critical habitat are these estuaries. Not only the waterways, but the salt marshes, utilizing the salt marshes for foraging. So the two are interconnected, and restoring those marshes has been a high priority for us. We have over 20,000 acres of salt marsh, and we've been working really hard with a multitude of agencies to restore those marshes.
Great. Okay. So we're at time here. Tara, before we get into the one thing we can't stop talking about, where can people find out more about the work that you guys are doing with the shorebirds or with the salt marsh restoration?
Sure, yeah. We have a good amount of information on our website, which is hempsteadny.gov. You can look under Conservation and Waterways is the department that's focused in on a lot of this work.
Great. Okay. So we're going to get into it. The one thing we can't stop talking about, tidal flooding or otherwise, Palma couldn't stop. She had us talk at the beginning about her topic, but we're going to see if she has a second round in her here. So we'll start off with you.
Well, just to continue what I was saying before about my bird camera, I'm very new to this, and I saw on Amazon you could buy different types of bird feed to attract a wider variety of species. So that's going to be next on my venture with this whole bird interest I have now.
Okay. All right, cool. I got nothing with birds on this. We got to talk about the Knicks. 53 years since they won a title. That's like I don't know, 175% of my age. I'm not really sure. I didn't do the math on that yet. I mean, the great thing about the Knicks is that if there's one team in the New York City area that unites everybody, it's the Knicks, because you don't have that for football. You don't have that for baseball. You definitely don't have that for hockey. WNBA did win their title last year with the Liberty. That's great. We're doing it again with basketball with the Knicks. I mean, so I'm recording, in fairness, we're recording this on June 17th, the day before the parade. I'm still not sure if I'm going to New York yet, because I keep getting scared with all these stories about get there at 5 a.m. There's going to be 1 million people in lower Manhattan. And even my friend who lives in Manhattan, who I was hoping to go with, but now he has 2 meetings, including with a guy from Africa, isn't sure if he even wants to go down there. So we'll see. I might update you guys. If I go to parade, I'll update where I'm at. So Tara, are you going to the parade? Where are you going to the next parade?
I wish I was going to the parade. I'll be out in the salt marsh tomorrow, but
okay. So no Knicks parade for you, but what's on your mind? What's one thing you can't stop talking about, tidal flooding or otherwise?
Yeah, no, I'll piggyback off the Knicks. For sure, is a huge thing in my family. With my father, who we recently lost, huge Knick fan. This is just would have been above and beyond for him to have seen them win. He sat through every game, all of their losses, and for me and my brothers, seeing the Knicks win has been just phenomenal, really phenomenal.
Yeah, I texted your brother on Saturday night. Well, your older brother, Greg, on Saturday night, and he was pumped. But I asked him if he was coming to the parade, and he said, unfortunately, no, he's not flying from California. So there we go. We got two Knicks people on here. Sorry, Palma. Maybe the Sixers will do better next year, but they got swept by the Knicks. So
Not really a big basketball fan, but I am a Philadelphia sports fan. So thank you for saying sorry.
No problem. Anytime. Maybe the Flyers will do better next year. All right. So for this episode of Tidal Flooding Talk, I'm Joe Martucci. We have Paul Michels. Big thank you to Tara for coming on today. We have new episodes for you every Tuesday night. You can like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. We'll talk to you later, everybody. Take care.